Red sand swirled around the small white figure huddled against a broken rock. The twin sons of Kranos beat down mercilessly on the desert world, turning the air into shimmering waves of heat that made everything dance like a mirage. But the tiny creature sitting alone in the wasteland was real enough, even if nobody wanted it to be. Pip pressed his small body deeper into the shadow of the stone, trying to escape the burning light. His pure white scales, so different from the rich bronze color of his nest siblings, offered no protection from the harsh environment. Every breath felt like swallowing fire, and his tongue kept darting out to wet his cracked lips. The water pouch his nest mother had grudgingly left him was already empty. 3 days had passed since the hatching ceremony. 3 days since his own family had pushed him away from their warm huddle, their eyes filled with shame and disgust. The elder had pronounced him cursed, a bad omen that would bring misfortune to the entire clutch if allowed to remain. His nest siblings had eagerly joined in driving him out, their bronze scales glinting in the torchlight as they hissed and snapped at his retreating form. Ghost Scale, they had called him. Void touched. Now he waited for death to claim him as tradition demanded. The desert would clean the shame from his family's name, and his bones would bleach white in the sand, invisible among the pale rocks. It was the proper way, the old way, the only way for one such as him. The sound of engines broke through his fevered dreams. Pip lifted his heavy head, golden eyes struggling to focus on the metal shape descending from the sky. A transport ship, battered and practical, nothing like the sleek vessels his people used for their ceremonial flights. This was a working ship, covered in scratches and burn marks from countless journeys between the stars. It landed near the mining outpost with a heavy thud that shook the ground. Pip watched through the heat haze as a ramp lowered and a figure emerged. Not Draknari. The shape was wrong, too tall and narrow, lacking the powerful tail and broad shoulders of his people. The creature wore strange coverings over its pale skin and moved with an odd two-legged gait. Human. Pip had heard stories about them from the workers who sometimes visited the nesting caves. They were newcomers to the galaxy, barely worthy of notice except for their willingness to haul cargo to places other species avoided. Most considered them little better than clever animals, useful for dangerous work but hardly worth serious consideration. The human disappeared into the outpost buildings, and Pip closed his eyes again. Maybe the heat was making him see things that weren't there. Maybe he was already dying, and these were just the final dreams his mind created before darkness took him. But the engine stayed quiet. The ship remained on the landing pad, and eventually the human emerged again. This time he was accompanied by one of the Draknari foremen, a big, bronze-scaled male who gestured dismissively toward the desert. Their voices carried on the thin air, though Pip could only catch fragments of their conversation. "Just leave it," the foreman was saying. "A tradition demands, still alive," came the reply in accented basic. "Can't just..." "Not your concern, freight runner." The ghost scale chose its fate when it was hatched wrong. "Now finish your delivery and go." The human said something else, but the foreman had already turned away, his tail lashing with irritation. Clearly the conversation was over. Pip watched the strange figure stand there for a long moment, looking out across the desert. Then to his amazement, the human began walking directly toward his hiding place. Each step brought the creature closer. Its odd flat face turned in his direction as if it could see him despite the distance and heat shimmer. Pip wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. Fear and weakness held him frozen as the human approached, growing larger with each stride until it stood just a few meters away. Up close, the creature was even stranger than the stories suggested. Its skin was brown like dried leather, with patches of darker color around the eyes and strange fur covering the top of its head. The eyes themselves were small and dark, lacking the large golden orbs that let Draknari see clearly in low light. How did it navigate in space with such poor vision? "Hey there, little guy," the human said softly, crouching down to make itself smaller. "You look like you could use some help." Pip tried to hiss a warning, as any proper Draknari would when threatened, but only a weak wheeze emerged from his parched throat. The human didn't seem frightened anyway. Instead, it reached into one of its coverings and pulled out a clear container filled with precious water. "Thirsty?" The creature, Sam, Pip heard it called when the foreman shouted after it, twisted something on the container and liquid poured into a cupped hand. "Come on, it's okay," I'm not going to hurt you." The smell of water was stronger than fear or pride. Pip crawled forward on shaking legs, his long tongue darting out to lap desperately at the offered drink. It was cool and clean, nothing like the brackish stuff from his family's water holes. He drank until his stomach felt ready to burst, then collapsed back against the rock with a grateful sigh. "That's better," Sam said, settling cross-legged in the sand nearby. "Now what's a little Draknari doing all alone out here? Where's your family?" Pip stared at this strange creature who showed no fear or disgust at his appearance. The human seemed genuinely concerned, as if his welfare actually mattered to someone. It was a feeling so foreign that he didn't know how to respond. "Ghost scale," he finally whispered in broken basic, the only words that came to mind. "Cursed." Understanding dawned in those small dark eyes. The human looked back toward the outpost, then at Pip's white scales, and something like anger crossed its features. "They threw you out," Sam said quietly. "Left you here to die because you're different." Pip nodded, not trusting his voice. The human was quiet for a long time, staring out at the endless desert. When it finally spoke again, its voice was firm with decision. "Well, that's not happening on my watch. What do you say we get out of here, little guy? I could use a co-pilot, and you look like you're between jobs." Before Pip could process what was happening, gentle hands were lifting him from the sand, carrying him toward the transport ship and away from everything he had ever known. Behind them, angry voices rose from the outpost, but Sam didn't slow down. For the first time in his short life, someone had chosen him over tradition. Someone had decided he was worth saving. Space was quieter than Pip had expected. The stories told in the nesting caves always described the void between stars as a place of howling winds and terrible cold. But inside Sam's transport ship, it felt safe and warm. The steady hum of the engines created a gentle vibration that reminded him of being curled up against his nest mother's belly, back when she still welcomed his presence. 2 weeks had passed since Sam carried him away from Kranos. 2 weeks of careful kindness from the human who had saved his life. At first, Pip had cowered in the corner of the small cargo hold, convinced this was all some elaborate trick that would end with him being thrown out an airlock. But Sam never raised a hand to him, never showed the disgust that other species displayed when they saw his white scales. Instead, the human brought him food, not the scraps and leftovers that cursed hatchlings usually received, but proper meals from his own supplies. Sam had even fashioned a comfortable nest from spare cargo blankets, placing it near the heating unit where Pip could stay warm during the long jumps between star systems. "You're getting stronger," Sam observed, watching Pip carefully clean his scales with a grooming cloth. "Color's coming back to your eyes too. You were pretty sick when I found you." Pip ducked his head shyly. Speaking to adults had never been encouraged in his old life, especially not for someone marked as cursed. But Sam seemed to expect responses, treating him like a real person instead of a burden to be endured. "Thank you," Pip managed in his improving basic. For everything." "Don't mention it, kid. Everyone deserves a chance." The communication panel chimed with an incoming message. Sam moved to answer it, and Pip heard the familiar harsh tones of Draknari speech fill the cabin. His blood turned cold as he recognized the voice of Foreman Grix from the Kranos mining station. "Human cargo hauler Rodriguez," Grix was saying. "You will return the defective hatchling immediately. Your interference with Draknari tradition is an insult to our species. The ghost scale belongs in the desert where it was placed." Sam's jaw tightened as he listened to the demand. When the message ended, he sat quietly for a moment before activating the reply function. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the independent freighter Lucky Strike," he said formally. "The juvenile Draknari aboard my vessel is here of his own free will, under human salvage laws and the protection of my ship's sovereignty. No further communication on this matter will be entertained." He cut the channel before Grix could respond, then turned to find Pip staring at him with wide golden eyes. You called me Draknari," Pip whispered. "Not ghost scale." "Not cursed. That's what you are, isn't it? Just because you look different doesn't make you less than anyone else." The simple statement hit Pip like a physical blow. In all his short life, no one had ever spoken to him that way. Even his own nest mother had struggled to hide her shame when she looked at him. But this human, this creature from a species barely recognized by galactic civilization, saw him as just another person. Over the following days, Sam began teaching him about human culture and the wider galaxy beyond Draknari space. He learned that humans came from a world called Earth, where thousands of different cultures existed side by side despite their differences. The concept was almost impossible for Pip to grasp. How could so many different groups live together without the strong unity that Draknari tradition demanded? Diversity makes us stronger, Sam explained while showing him star charts. Different perspectives, different ways of solving problems. Your people focus so much on conformity that they miss out on what makes individuals special. Pip absorbed these lessons eagerly, hungry for knowledge that had been denied him in his old life. In return, he found himself sharing things about Draknari culture that he had never spoken aloud before. He told Sam about the nesting caves, about the complex social hierarchies based on scale color and nest position, about the ancient fears that drove his people to reject anything unusual. To his amazement, Sam listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest in understanding. When Pip mentioned his strange ability to sense stellar currents and gravitational fields, Sam's eyes lit up with excitement rather than fear. "That sounds incredibly useful for navigation," the human said. "Have you ever tried using it to plot jump coordinates?" The idea had never occurred to Pip. Such skills were reserved for trained pilots, not cursed hatchlings. But when Sam brought up the navigation console and showed him the basic controls, something clicked in his mind. The swirling patterns of space-time that the instrument struggled to map were as clear to him as the sand dunes of Kranos. "Here," he said tentatively, pointing to a spot on the display. "The gravity well curves this way, not straight like the computer thinks. If we adjust the entry angle by 3 degrees, Sam made the changes and ran the calculations. The new route would save them 6 hours of travel time and reduce fuel consumption by 15%. The human stared at the results for a long moment, then looked at Pip with something like awe. "Kid, that's extraordinary. How did you know?" I can feel it," Pip said, struggling to put the sensation into words. "Like currents in water, but made of space itself." "Is that wrong?" "Wrong? That's the most impressive thing I've ever seen. Most navigators need years of training and expensive equipment to plot routes half that good." The praise made Pip's scales flush with warmth. For the first time in his life, his differences were being celebrated instead of condemned. He found himself sitting straighter, speaking more confidently, daring to believe that maybe he wasn't the worthless creature his people had labeled him. Their peaceful routine was interrupted 3 days later when they docked at Ceres Station for fuel and supplies. The moment they entered the main concourse, Pip sensed hostile eyes upon them. A group of Draknari merchants stood near the information kiosks, their bronze scales gleaming under the artificial lights. One of them spotted Pip and let out a hiss of disgust. "Ghost scale," the merchant spat, loud enough for the entire corridor to hear. "What human fool brings cursed spawn into a respectable station?" Other Draknari began to gather, their faces twisted with revulsion and fear. Pip pressed closer to Sam's side, his newfound confidence crumbling under their familiar hatred. The human placed a protective hand on his shoulder and kept walking, but the merchants followed. "You don't understand what you've done," one of them called out. "That creature brings misfortune to all who harbor it. Send it back to the void where it belongs." Sam stopped walking and turned to face the group. His voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel that made even the largest Draknari take a step back. "This young man is my navigator and crew member," he said clearly. "He's earned his place aboard my ship through skill and dedication. If you have a problem with that, take it up with station security." The confrontation ended there, but Pip knew it wouldn't be the last. As they continued through the station, he caught fragments of whispered conversations and felt the weight of stares following their every move. His presence was causing trouble for Sam, just like it had for his birth family. That night, as they prepared to depart Ceres Station, Pip made a decision that had been building in his mind since the encounter. "Sam," he said quietly, "maybe they're right. Maybe I should go back to Kranos, to the desert. I don't want to bring you bad luck." The human stopped his pre-flight checks and turned to face him fully. Those small dark eyes were fierce with an emotion Pip had never seen directed at him before. Protective anger. "Listen to me very carefully," Sam said. "You are not cursed. You are not bad luck. You're a smart, capable individual who happens to look different from what your people expect. Anyone who can't see that is blind, and their opinions don't matter." He paused, then continued more gently. "You're part of my crew now, Pip. That means something to humans. We don't abandon family just because other people disapprove. Family, The word hit Pip like a physical blow, but this time it was warm instead of painful. Family by choice rather than birth. Family that valued him for who he was instead of what he looked like. For the first time since leaving Kranos, he allowed himself to hope that this new life might actually last. As the Lucky Strike jumped to hyperspace, leaving the prejudices of Ceres Station far behind, Pip settled into his navigation chair and began plotting their course to the next destination. His strange abilities painted the currents of spacetime in brilliant colors across his mind, and he smiled as he guided them safely through the cosmic storm toward whatever adventures awaited. The cargo bay doors hissed shut as the last container locked into place. Pip checked the manifest on his tablet, confirming that all 73 units of processed titanium were properly secured for the jump to Harmony Colony. At 15 years old now, he had grown into his role as Sam's co-pilot and navigator, his white scales gleaming with health and his golden eyes bright with intelligence. 3 years of traveling the spaceways had transformed the scared hatchling into a confident young adult. His natural abilities had only grown stronger with practice, allowing him to plot routes through dangerous asteroid fields and navigate space storms that would challenge even veteran pilots. The Lucky Strike had earned a reputation as the most reliable transport in the Outer Rim, thanks largely to Pip's extraordinary talents. "Ready for departure," he reported to Sam, settling into his navigation chair. "I've mapped a route around the solar flare activity in the Vega system. Should add about 4 hours to our travel time, but it's safer than trying to push through the radiation." "Good thinking," Sam replied, running through his own pre-flight checklist. Better late than sorry when we're carrying volatile cargo. Their partnership had become so natural that they rarely needed to discuss navigation decisions anymore. Sam handled the business side of their operations while Pip managed the technical aspects of getting from place to place safely. It was a good life, better than either of them had dared hope for when they first met on Kranos, but success had brought unwanted attention. The communication panel lit up with an incoming priority message as they prepared to leave port. Sam frowned as he recognized the official seal of the Draknari Conclave, the ruling council of his species. Pip felt his stomach twist with familiar dread as his birth father's voice filled the cabin. "I am High Counselor Drak of the Seventh Nest," the formal tones announced. "This message is directed to the human called Samuel Rodriguez and the stolen hatchling he unlawfully harbors. By the ancient laws of our people and the authority granted by the Galactic Compact, I demand the immediate return of the Cursed One for proper cultural re-education." The message continued with legal citations and threats of diplomatic action, but Pip had stopped listening. The voice he remembered from his earliest memories was exactly the same, cold, disapproving, utterly certain of its own righteousness. His birth father had risen to become one of the most powerful Draknari in the galaxy, and now he was using that power to reclaim the son he had once thrown away. "Cultural re-education," Sam repeated when the message ended. "That doesn't sound good." Pip's mouth was too dry to answer immediately. He had learned enough about galactic politics over the years to understand what those words really meant. Re-education was a polite term for the process of breaking individuals who refused to conform to social expectations. For someone like him, it would be a slow death sentence carried out in the name of tradition. "They want to make an example of me," he finally managed. "Show other Draknari what happens when they reject the old ways. My father, High Counselor Drak, he always believed that deviation from tradition was the greatest sin possible." "Well, he can believe whatever he wants," Sam said grimly. "You're an adult now and you get to choose your own path. No one's dragging you back to that life." But even as Sam spoke those defiant words, both of them knew the situation had become far more complicated. The Draknari Conclave wasn't just any political organization. It was one of the oldest and most respected governing bodies in the galaxy. If they chose to make Pip's case a formal matter of cultural sovereignty, even the human government might be forced to hand him over to avoid a diplomatic crisis. Over the following weeks, the pressure continued to build. Other Draknari they encountered became increasingly hostile, as if word had spread through their communities about the corrupted albino who dared to live among aliens. What had once been simple disgust and avoidance escalated into active confrontation. At Frontier Station, a group of young Draknari traders surrounded Pip while he was loading supplies, their bronze scales flushed with righteous anger. The largest of them, barely older than Pip himself, stepped forward with his claws extended. Ghost scale, the traitor hissed. You shame all true Draknari with your presence. Return to the void where you belong, or we will send you there ourselves. Pip tried to back away but found his path blocked by other members of the group. Their eyes held the fanatic gleam of people absolutely convinced they were doing the right thing. These weren't just random bigots looking for trouble. They truly believed he was an abomination that needed to be destroyed for the good of their species. I don't want any trouble, Pip said carefully, keeping his hands visible and non-threatening. I'm just here to do my job. Your job? Another traitor laughed harshly. You're a pet, not a worker. A human's plaything pretending to be something you're not. At least have the dignity to admit what you are. The confrontation might have turned violent, but Sam appeared with 2 station security officers before the situation could escalate further. The Draknari traitors grudgingly dispersed, but their parting glares promised that this wouldn't be the last encounter. You okay? Sam asked as they finished loading their cargo. I'm fine, Pip lied, though his hands were still shaking slightly. Just more of the same hatred I've always faced. But it wasn't the same, and they both knew it. The hostility was becoming more organized, more deliberate. Someone was spreading word through Draknari communities, turning his existence into a symbol of everything they feared about change and outside influence. The real crisis came 3 months later at Port Haven, one of the busiest trade hubs in the Mid-Rim. They had just completed a routine cargo run when uniformed figures surrounded their ship on the landing pad. Not station security this time, but Draknari enforcers wearing the ceremonial armor of the Conclave Guard. By order of the High Council, their leader announced through a voice amplifier, the cursed one known as Pip will be taken into custody for immediate transport to Draknari space. Surrender the fugitive and no charges will be filed against the human accomplice. Pip felt his world tilt sideways. Somehow the Conclave had gained the authority to act outside their own territory. Whether through legal maneuvering or simple political pressure, they now had the power to enforce their demands across the galaxy. Stay behind me, Sam whispered, his hand moving toward the weapon on his belt. We're not going quietly. But even as he spoke, more enforcers emerged from concealment around the landing pad. They were outnumbered 10-1, and the Draknari were heavily armed. Fighting would only get Sam killed and accomplish nothing except satisfying Pip's pride. No, Pip said quietly. I won't let you die for me. He started to step forward, ready to surrender himself to save his friend, but Sam grabbed his arm. Like hell, the human growled. Nobody takes my family without a fight. What happened next became legendary in spacer bars across the rim. Sam triggered the Lucky Strike's emergency takeoff sequence, while simultaneously activating the ship's defensive systems. Cargo containers scattered across the landing pad as the transport rose on pillars of fire, its shields deflecting the energy bolts from the enforcers' weapons. Pip threw himself into the navigator's seat and began plotting the fastest escape route his abilities could manage. Space-time currents swirled through his consciousness as he mapped a path through the system's asteroid belt, threading between gravity wells and radiation fields that would challenge any pursuit. Hang on, Sam shouted over the alarms as pursuit ships launched from the station. This is going to get bumpy. They ran the blockade like pirates in an old story, dodging between massive cargo freighters and diving through the superstructure of an orbital shipyard. Pip's unnatural talents kept them one step ahead of their pursuers, but he knew this was only a temporary escape. The Draknari had the resources of an entire species behind them, while he and Sam were just 2 individuals with a single ship. As they finally cleared the system's gravity well and prepared to jump to hyperspace, Pip realized that his old life was truly over. He could never again walk openly through civilized space without fear of capture. The simple happiness he had found with Sam was now a hunted existence, always looking over their shoulders for the next threat. But as he felt Sam's steady presence beside him and saw the determination in those dark human eyes, Pip also realized something else. He wasn't alone in this fight. For the first time in galactic history, someone was willing to stand against an entire species' prejudices for the sake of a single individual's freedom. The Lucky Strike vanished into hyperspace, carrying them toward an uncertain future, but away from the chains of tradition that had bound Pip since birth. Behind them, the Draknari enforcers could only watch and plan their next move in a conflict that was rapidly escalating beyond anyone's control. The abandoned research station drifted silently in the shadow of a dead moon, its corridors dark except for the emergency lighting that cast eerie red shadows on the walls. Dr. Nina Webb worked by portable illumination in what had once been the xenoarchaeology department, her weathered hands carefully brushing dust from ancient Draknari artifacts that most people would have dismissed as worthless relics. But Nina knew better. She had spent 20 years studying alien cultures for the Terran Science Foundation, and the pieces she was uncovering here told a story that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. "Sam, you need to see this," she called out as footsteps echoed in the corridor behind her. "What I've found changes everything we thought we knew about Draknari history." Sam Rodriguez entered the makeshift laboratory with Pip close behind him, both looking exhausted from their latest narrow escape from Conclave forces. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at Port Haven, and they had been running ever since, jumping from one abandoned outpost to another while trying to stay ahead of their pursuers. "Please tell me you found something useful." "Nina," Sam said, slumping into a salvaged chair, "because we're running out of places to hide, and I'm tired of living like criminals." Nina held up a crystalline data tablet covered in intricate carvings, its surface still glowing faintly with stored information, despite being thousands of years old. This tablet contains genealogical records from the early Draknari civilization. "Look at these bloodline markers." She activated her translation software, and holographic text appeared in the air above the artifact. Pip leaned forward, his golden eyes widening as he recognized the ancient script that few modern Draknari could read anymore. "The Navigators," he breathed, reading the flowing symbols. "It says here that the Navigators were the most honored caste in ancient society. They guided the first colony ships between the stars using abilities that—" He paused, his voice catching with emotion. "Using abilities that let them sense the flow of space-time itself." "Keep reading," Nina encouraged gently. Pip's voice grew stronger as he continued translating. "The Navigators were marked by scales of pure white, a sign of their connection to the cosmic void between worlds. They served as both guides and spiritual leaders, their gifts making interstellar travel possible in the age before artificial intelligence." Sam looked between the tablet and his young friend, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. "White scales. Like yours." "Exactly like his," Nina confirmed. "Pip, you're not a genetic defect or a cursed anomaly. You're a throwback to the most revered bloodline in Draknari history. Your abilities aren't a disability. They're a nearly extinct gift that your ancestors used to build their entire civilization." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant hum of the station's failing life support systems. Pip stared at the ancient tablet as if seeing his own reflection for the first time, his mind struggling to process this complete reversal of everything he had been taught about himself. "But if this is true," he said slowly, "why do my people hate me? Why do they treat white scales as a curse instead of a blessing?" Nina activated another hologram, this one showing a star map of ancient Draknari territory. "Because someone deliberately erased this knowledge from their cultural memory. Look at these records from about 3,000 years ago." The new documents told a darker story. As technology advanced and artificial navigation systems became available, the Navigators found their traditional role challenged by those who preferred mechanical solutions over biological gifts. What started as philosophical differences escalated into outright persecution when a radical faction called the Purists gained political power. "They called it the Great Purification," Nina explained, her voice heavy with disgust. "The Purists convinced the population that biological enhancement was unnatural, that true Draknari should rely only on technology and tradition. They systematically hunted down anyone with Navigator bloodlines, claiming they were corrupted by alien influence. The historical records painted a picture of systematic genocide disguised as religious purification. Families with Navigator children were forced to undergo cleansing rituals that typically ended in death. Those who tried to hide their heritage were branded as traitors and exiled to die in the void between stars. The few survivors went into hiding," Nina continued. "They adopted bronze-scale dyes to blend in with the general population, and the genetic markers went dormant for generations. But occasionally, very rarely, a child would be born showing the original traits. And rather than admit their history of genocide," Sam said grimly, "the modern Draknari perpetuate the lie that white scales are cursed. They're still trying to finish what the Purists started." Pip was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of what they had discovered. His entire life had been shaped by a lie, his people's fear and hatred built on deliberate ignorance of their own past. The abilities that made him special weren't a curse to be hidden, they were a legacy that had been stolen from his entire species. "There's more," Nina said, activating a final set of records. According to these documents, the navigators weren't just gifted individuals. They were part of a breeding program designed to enhance natural space-time sensitivity. The genetic modifications were passed down through bloodlines, creating an entire subspecies with enhanced abilities. She pulled up a detailed genetic analysis that made Sam whistle in amazement. "Pip, your brain structure is literally different from baseline Draknari. You have additional neural pathways that let you process quantum information in ways that no artificial system can match. What you do instinctively would require massive computer arrays for anyone else to accomplish. But if this information exists," Pip said, "why hasn't anyone else discovered it? Why doesn't the Conclave know about their own history?" "Because they destroyed most of the records during the purification," Nina explained. "What I found here was hidden away in a research station that was abandoned during a corporate merger. The archaeologists who originally excavated these artifacts never had the chance to publish their findings before the funding was cut." Sam leaned back in his chair, his mind racing through the implications. "So we have proof that the entire basis for Draknari prejudice is built on historical lies. Their most honored ancestors were exactly like Pip, and they've been committing slow genocide for 3,000 years to cover up their own shame." "More than that," Nina said with growing excitement. "We have proof that navigator abilities could revolutionize space travel for everyone. Imagine if ships could navigate by instinct instead of needing massive sensor arrays and quantum computers. The cost savings alone would be enormous, not to mention the safety benefits." But even as they discussed the implications of their discovery, all three of them knew that knowledge alone wouldn't be enough to change millennia of ingrained prejudice. The Draknari Conclave had too much invested in the current system to simply admit they had been wrong about something so fundamental to their identity. "They'll try to suppress this information," Pip said quietly. "Even if we published it across the galaxy, they'd claim it was fake or misinterpreted. They can't afford to let their people learn the truth." "Maybe," Sam agreed, "but that doesn't mean we give up. Truth has a way of surfacing eventually, especially when it's this explosive." Nina began copying the archaeological data onto portable storage devices, her movements quick and efficient despite her excitement. "I'll transmit copies to every academic institution I can reach. The more people who have this information, the harder it will be to suppress." As they prepared to leave the research station, Pip found himself standing before a mirror in one of the abandoned crew quarters. For the first time in his life, he looked at his white scales without shame or apology. They weren't a mark of divine displeasure or genetic failure. They were a badge of honor that connected him to the greatest heroes of his people's past. The young Draknari who stared back at him from the reflection was still the same person who had been rescued from the desert years ago, but now he carried himself differently. The weight of false shame had been lifted from his shoulders, replaced by the knowledge of who he really was and what his abilities truly meant. But with that knowledge came a new burden. He was possibly the last true navigator in the galaxy, carrying genetic gifts that had been nearly extinct for 3 millennia. The question now was what to do with that legacy, and whether one individual could stand against an entire civilization's determination to keep their shameful secrets buried. As the Lucky Strike departed the research station and jumped back into the dangerous game of cat and mouse with their pursuers, Pip began to understand that his personal struggle for acceptance had become something much larger. The truth about the navigators wouldn't just vindicate his right to exist, it would challenge the very foundations of Draknari society and force his people to confront the darkest chapter of their history. The real fight was just beginning. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from dozens of species filled the massive amphitheater. Floating translation drones ensured that every word spoken would be understood by all present, while news feeds broadcast the proceedings to billions of viewers across known space. This wasn't just another diplomatic hearing. It was a trial that would determine the fate of one individual and potentially reshape the relationship between species, sovereignty, and individual rights. Pip sat in the defendant's chair, his white scales gleaming under the harsh spotlights that illuminated the central platform. At 18, he had grown into the full dignity of his heritage, carrying himself with a quiet confidence that came from finally understanding his true nature. Beside him, Sam Rodriguez wore his best civilian clothes, though he kept checking his watch nervously as they waited for the proceedings to begin. Across the chamber, High Counselor Drac led the Draknari delegation, his bronze scales polished to mirror brightness and his ceremonial robes radiating authority. He had aged in the years since casting out his albino son, but his eyes still held the same cold certainty that had condemned Pip to die in the desert. To him, this hearing was a chance to finally close an embarrassing chapter and demonstrate the superiority of traditional values over human sentimentality. The Galactic Council will come to order, announced Chancellor Valthera, a tall crystalline being whose species had mediated interstellar disputes for over 1,000 years. We are gathered to resolve the matter of custody and species sovereignty regarding the individual known as Pip, claimed by both the Draknari Conclave and the human Samuel Rodriguez. The Draknari representative stood first, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. Honored Chancellor, the law is clear. Pip is a Draknari citizen by birth, subject to our cultural laws and traditions regardless of where he currently resides. His removal from our territory was an illegal kidnapping that violated our sovereign rights. He activated a holographic display showing excerpts from interstellar law. Article 7 of the Galactic Compact specifically protects the right of species to maintain their cultural practices without outside interference. The human Rodriguez has corrupted a Draknari youth with alien values, preventing his proper integration into society. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates as the legal arguments unfolded. Many species had their own traditions that might be considered harsh by outsider standards, and they were naturally sympathetic to claims of cultural sovereignty. If humans could simply take children from other species whenever they disagreed with local customs, it would set a dangerous precedent. Sam stood to respond, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. Respected delegates, no law in the galaxy requires an individual to submit to death or persecution simply because of how they were born. Pip was abandoned to die in a desert, not taken from a loving family. I offered sanctuary to someone in desperate need, and he chose to accept. He gestured toward his friend and partner. For 3 years, Pip has proven himself to be a skilled navigator and valuable member of my crew. He's earned the right to choose his own path in life, free from the prejudices that would have killed him as a child. The human delegation's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Lisa Park, took over the legal arguments. The precedent here isn't about species sovereignty, it's about basic individual rights. If we accept that anyone can be forced to return to persecution simply because of their biological origins, we undermine the fundamental principles that the Galactic Council was founded to protect. But even as the legal arguments continued, Pip could see that words alone wouldn't be enough to sway the assembled delegates. Too many of them were swayed by the traditional view that species had absolute authority over their own members, regardless of individual circumstances. The turning point came when Dr. Nina Webb was called as an expert witness. The xenoarchaeologist took the stand with quiet confidence, carrying a datapad loaded with the evidence they had discovered at the abandoned research station. Honored delegates, she began, I have spent the last 6 months analyzing historical records that completely change our understanding of this case. What you see before you isn't a genetic defect or cultural aberration. Pip represents a return to the most honored bloodline in ancient Draknari civilization. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs as Nina presented her findings. The holographic displays showed ancient tablets, genetic analyses, and historical records that painted a picture of systematic genocide disguised as religious purification. For nearly an hour, she methodically destroyed the foundation of modern Draknari prejudice against albino individuals. High Counselor Drac rose to object, his voice sharp with anger. These so-called discoveries are fabrications designed to justify the human theft of our cultural property. No such bloodline ever existed in our history. Then explain this, Nina replied calmly, activating a new display that showed genetic mapping results. Pip's DNA contains sequences that don't exist in the general Draknari population. These are the same enhancement markers described in the ancient breeding records, proof that navigator abilities are real and that your people have been systematically eliminating their own greatest treasures for 3,000 years. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. If Nina's evidence was genuine, it meant that the Draknari had built their entire modern identity on a foundation of lies and murder. The implications went far beyond one individual's custody case. This was evidence of one of the largest genocides in galactic history. Before the Council could fully process these revelations, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency broadcasts cut into the proceedings, announcing that a Draknari battle fleet had arrived at the edge of the system and was demanding immediate custody of the cursed criminal, or they would consider it an act of war. Chancellor Valthara's crystalline form flickered with agitation as she received updates from station security. "Hi, Counselor Drak. Are you aware that your government has dispatched military vessels to threaten this neutral facility? The Conclave will not allow our sovereignty to be trampled by alien interference," Drak replied coldly. "If this council refuses to honor our legitimate claims, we will take the necessary action to protect our cultural integrity." The threat was clear. Either they handed over Pip, or the Draknari would start a war that could engulf the entire galaxy. The assembled delegates began arguing frantically among themselves, torn between their legal principles and the practical reality of military intimidation. But Pip had heard enough. Standing slowly from his chair, he activated the chamber's communication system and spoke directly to the billions watching across the galaxy. "My name is Pip Rodriguez," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "I am the son of Sam Rodriguez by choice, and I am the last known navigator of the Draknari people by birth. For 3 years I have lived freely among humans and other species, using abilities that my birth people call cursed, but which their own ancestors honored above all other gifts." He gestured toward the holographic displays showing Nina's research. "The evidence is clear. My people have spent 3 millennia murdering their own children to hide their shame about committing genocide against their greatest heroes. They call me cursed because the truth of what I represent threatens everything they've built their identity upon." The young navigator's words resonated through the chamber and across the galaxy as he continued. "But I will not hide anymore. I will not pretend to be less than I am to make others comfortable with their prejudices. If the Draknari want to start a war over one individual's right to exist, then let the galaxy see what their cultural values really represent." As if summoned by his defiant words, proximity alarms sounded again as the Draknari fleet moved into attack position. But before the first shots could be fired, something extraordinary happened. Other ships began emerging from hyperspace, human vessels, Centauri cruisers, even a few rebel Draknari ships whose crews had been moved by the proceedings. The message was clear. Pip wasn't standing alone anymore. His story had inspired people across the galaxy to take a stand against the kind of systemic prejudice and cultural oppression that had nearly destroyed him. Individual courage had sparked something larger, a coalition of those who believed that universal rights mattered more than species sovereignty. "Hi." Counselor Drak stared at the tactical displays showing the growing fleet arrayed against his forces, his face pale with the realization that his military intimidation had backfired spectacularly. What should have been a simple retrieval operation had become a galactic crisis that could destroy his government's credibility forever. "This isn't over," he warned as emergency evacuation protocols activated throughout the council station. "The Conclave will not forget this insult to our traditions." But as he spoke those words, Pip was already moving toward the docking bay where the Lucky Strike waited. The hearing was over, decided not by legal arguments or political maneuvering, but by the simple truth that some principles were worth fighting for regardless of the cost. The young navigator who had once waited to die in a desert now carried the hopes of countless others who had been told they were worthless because they didn't fit into narrow definitions of acceptability. The real battle was just beginning. But for the first time since this all started, Pip believed they could actually win. Sunrise painted the mountains surrounding Haven Colony in shades of gold and crimson, casting long shadows across the valley where nearly 3,000 refugees had built a new kind of community. The settlement buzzed with activity as beings from dozens of different species worked together on projects that would have been impossible in the rigidly segregated societies they had left behind. Pip stood on the observation deck of the central administration building, Watching a group of young Centauri children play with human and Draknari youngsters in the school courtyard below. 6 months had passed since the confrontation at the Galactic Council, and the Haven colony had become a symbol of what was possible when prejudice gave way to cooperation. "The morning meditation group is asking if you'll join them again," Sam said, approaching with 2 cups of coffee and the relaxed smile that had become common since they'd found this sanctuary. "Apparently your guidance on stellar current reading is helping them understand spatial relationships in ways their traditional training never covered." "I'll be down in a few minutes," Pip replied, accepting the warm cup gratefully. "I want to finish reviewing the applications first. We have 17 more families requesting sanctuary this week, including 3 with genetically variant children who've been rejected by their birth cultures." The success of Haven Colony had created an unexpected problem. More people wanted to join their community than their infrastructure could currently support. Every day brought new messages from individuals who had heard about a place where differences were celebrated instead of condemned, where species barriers mattered less than personal character. Sam joined him at the observation window, his expression thoughtful as he watched the mixed groups of children playing together. "Hard to believe it's only been 6 months. Sometimes it feels like we've been building this place our whole lives." "In a way we have," Pip mused. "Every choice we made, every time we stood up to prejudice, it was all leading toward this moment. We just didn't know it at the time." The communication panel chimed softly and Nina Webb's face appeared on the screen. The xenoarchaeologist looked tired but excited as she called in from her new research facility on the edge of Draknari space. "Pip, you need to see the latest intelligence reports," she said without preamble. "The Reformation movement on Draknar Prime is gaining serious momentum. 3 major cities have elected new leadership that's promised to investigate the historical records I published." She transmitted a data packet that showed polling results, protest footage, and interviews with young Draknari who were openly questioning their society's treatment of genetic variants. The revelations about the navigators had hit the conservative Draknari culture like a bomb, forcing millions to confront uncomfortable truths about their own history. "High Counselor Drak is fighting back hard," Nina continued. "He's declared martial law in the capital and arrested dozens of reform leaders. But the movement is spreading faster than he can suppress it. There are reports of underground networks helping albino children escape to neutral territory before they can be abandoned in the traditional way." Pip felt a complex mix of emotions as he absorbed the reports: pride that his people were finally beginning to question their prejudices, but sadness for all the children who had suffered and died before this awakening began. Change was coming to Draknari society, but it was coming too late for too many. "There's something else," Nina added, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. "We've identified at least 12 other individuals with navigator genetics scattered across the galaxy. Most of them are hiding their abilities, pretending to be baseline Draknari to avoid persecution. But a few have reached out through intermediaries asking about Haven Colony." The implications were staggering. Pip had spent years believing he was the last of his kind. But there were others out there, survivors of a genocide that had lasted 3,000 years, each one carrying genetic gifts that could benefit all of galactic civilization. "Send them our coordinates," he said immediately, "and tell them they'll find family here, not judgment." After Nina signed off, Pip and Sam stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher over their unlikely community. The colony had started as a refuge for outcasts and rejects, but it was becoming something much more significant, a demonstration that diversity truly did make civilization stronger. "Sir?" A young voice interrupted their contemplation. Pip turned to see Kira, a 12-year-old human girl whose empathic abilities had made her unwelcome in many human settlements where emotional privacy was highly valued. She had arrived 3 weeks ago with her grandmother, both of them exhausted from years of hiding what made Kira special. "What is it, Kira?" Pip asked gently, kneeling down to bring himself to her eye level. "The new family that arrived yesterday, the Valdrani ones, their daughter has the same kind of abilities as me, but she's scared to use them. She keeps apologizing for contaminating people with her emotions. Could you maybe talk to her?" Pip smiled, remembering his own fear and shame when Sam first found him. "Of course. Why don't you bring her to the navigation center this afternoon? I'll show her how abilities that make us different can also make us valuable." As Kira ran off with obvious relief, Sam shook his head in amazement. You know what's incredible? A year ago, that kid was hiding her gifts because her own species made her feel like a freak. Now she's helping other children learn to embrace their differences. That's what Haven is really about, Pip replied. Not just providing sanctuary, but teaching people that the things that make them different are often the things that make them extraordinary. The rest of the day passed in the familiar rhythm that had developed in their growing community. Pip spent the morning working with the stellar cartography team, using his navigator abilities to plot safe routes for the ships that regularly brought supplies and new residents to Haven Colony. The afternoon was devoted to the school, where children from different species learned together in ways that challenged traditional boundaries between cultures. But the evening brought an unexpected visitor. The Lucky Strike's proximity alarms activated as an unidentified ship requested permission to land, transmitting authorization codes that Pip recognized with a mixture of surprise and trepidation. The vessel that touched down on the colony's landing pad was sleek and obviously expensive, bearing the diplomatic markings of the Galactic Mediation Service. The figure who emerged was a middle-aged Draknari with bronze scales that had faded to a dull copper with age, his bearing suggesting someone accustomed to authority but uncertain about his reception. Hello, Pip, the newcomer said formally as a small crowd gathered to observe this unprecedented visit. I am Counselor Brix of the Reformed Draknari Assembly. I come bearing an official message from the new leadership on Draknar Prime. Pip studied the counselor carefully, remembering too many encounters with Draknari officials who had viewed him as something to be destroyed or captured. But this one was different. His eyes held respect rather than disgust, and his posture suggested a supplicant rather than an authority figure making demands. What kind of message? Pip asked cautiously. Counselor Brix activated a holographic projector, displaying the seal of what appeared to be a completely new governmental structure. 3 weeks ago, the people of Draknar Prime voted to dissolve the old conclave and establish a reformed government based on principles of individual dignity and historical truth. High Counselor Drak and his supporters have been removed from power and are facing trial for crimes against our own people. The hologram shifted to show massive crowds celebrating in the streets of Draknari cities, many of them carrying banners that bore images of white scales and ancient navigator symbols. The sight of his own people embracing the heritage they had once tried to destroy brought tears to Pip's golden eyes. The new assembly has asked me to extend a formal invitation, Brix continued. We would like you to return to Draknar Prime as an honored guest, to help us rebuild our understanding of navigator traditions and ensure that such persecution never happens again. The offer hung in the air like a challenge to everything Pip had built at Haven Colony. After years of running from his birth culture, he was being invited to return as a hero and teacher. It was vindication beyond anything he had dared to imagine. But as he looked around at the mixed community that had become his true home, seeing humans and Centauri and Valdrani and dozen other species working together in harmony, Pip realized that his answer had been obvious all along. Thank you for the invitation, Counselor, he said respectfully. But my place is here, helping to build something that goes beyond the boundaries of any single species. However, if your new government is serious about change, I would welcome Draknari visitors who want to learn about cooperation instead of conquest. Brix nodded slowly, his expression suggesting that he had expected this response. I understand. Perhaps it is fitting that the last navigator chooses to guide all species toward a better future, rather than focusing on just one. As the counselor's ship departed the next morning, carrying with it formal recognition of Haven Colony as a sovereign territory and promises of future cooperation, Pip stood once again on the observation deck watching his community wake up to a new day. Children of different species were already gathering in the courtyard, eager to learn and play together without the barriers that had defined their parents' generations. A soft chime indicated an incoming message, and Pip smiled as he recognized the signal pattern. Another ship was approaching, carrying another family of refugees seeking sanctuary among people who would value their differences instead of punishing them. Sam, he called out, already moving toward the landing pad. We have visitors coming in. Looks like a Therian transport with about 20 passengers. Another rescue mission? Sam asked, joining him with the easy grin that had never changed despite all they had been through together. The best kind, Pip replied, his white scales catching the morning sunlight as they walked toward whatever new challenges and opportunities awaited their growing family of choice. Behind them, Haven Colony continued its daily miracle of proving that differences could be strengths, that outcasts could become heroes, and that sometimes the most important journeys began with a simple act of compassion toward someone the rest of the galaxy had decided wasn't worth saving.